But the island wasn't dark. This high above town, Turner could see lanterns moving up and down and across Malaga, some in a line down by the coast, some clustered more toward the island's far side, blinking on and off and on again as they passed stands of trees. There must have been 15, 20 of them. Then the lanterns on the far side seemed to come together and grow suddenly brighter until Turner realized that it wasn't lanterns he was seeing. It was a full fire shining a weird orange on the island's snow. Then the door at the bottom of the stairs slammed shut so hard the glass rattled around him. He abandoned the starlight and scrambled down the dark steepness, shouting like an enraged Aeneas until he fell against the door, which did not yield. He stood and pounded, then sat back against the stairs and kicked at it with both feet. "Strike 3, he heard a voice say on the other side of the door. "You're out." Then footsteps down the stairs. Turner pounded again, but the door had been bolted. Breathless, Turner ran back up into the light of the cupola. Out on Malaga Island, the orange light flared higher and a line of lanterns headed toward the shore, disappearing from Turner's sight as they neared the granite ledges. Desperate, he looked down at the darkness of the town, but there was no one to call to. Pressed against the glass, his hand began to burn on the icy pane. The glass. Turner sat down on the floor of the cupola, held his legs up, hoped that Mrs. Cobb wouldn't mind too much that he was about to do a whole lot more to her cupola than he had ever done to her grandfather's picket fence, and kicked against the glass. It shattered around him. He kicked again and again, knocking shards out of the panes until he could crawl out onto the roof. It was, he knew as soon as he put his hand on it, a very icy roof, and it slanted more than he wished it did, and the elm branches that lay upon it looked more brittle in the dark cold than they did in the dark leafy green of early fall. "Safely to your mansions guide me, never, oh never to walk alone," said Turner, and let himself slide off the sill and down into the branches, which did not break, but which gathered him up like the pocket of a baseball glove catching a falling ball. Holding on to the elm, he drew himself across the roof, then crawled along the trunk and onto Parkerhead Road. He ran, panting, grimacing with the cold air that struck deep into his lungs, hoping, praying that Malaga was not lost. When the road gave way to the woods, he ran on, using the light on the snow to guide them, holding his arms out across his face to ward off the branches that swiped at him, hoping, praying. And when he reached the granite ledges and looked across to Malaga, he could almost believe in a hope and prayer, because there was nothing to show that the lanterns had been there, not a sign. He could hear the waves quarrel as they made their way up the new meadows, but no other sound. Turner lifted his face to the sea breeze and sniffed. Not even the scent of smoke. He thought about climbing down the ledges, but in the dark he wasn't sure. He could find the holds. But in the dark he wasn't sure he could find the holds. Some of them might even be iced over. The moon came up, jumping right over a sea cliff to hang above the horizon, and it laid its veil over the island so that Malaga shone with a luminous silver, every stone, every pine, as if an artist had engraved it and set it on the water. For a moment, even the waves stopped, and the island held its breath, and Turner thought, "This is how I'll always remember it. This is how it will always be." Then in the quiet of that whitening night, standing in the new snow with the pine boughs coated above him, Turner felt the hand that he had feared all night long grab him by the shoulder, felt it spin him around, felt the roar of a shotgun blast flash into the night, a white explosion almost in his face that startled the sleeping gulls up into the air. Turner screamed as he fell backwards into the snow. He scuttled to the edge of the ledges, felt his hand miss, pulled himself back and tried to get his legs under him. He could hardly see for the explosion, and he held one hand out to ward off whoever had shot at him. "You're all right, boy. Nobody's going to hurt you." Turner wasn't sure he was making out every word, what with the ringing in his ears and the clanging in his brain. "It's the sheriff, Sheriff Elwell. Stand up. Nobody's going to hurt you." Turner crawled away from the ledges and stood up unsteadily as if the blast had loosened the granite beneath him and it was swaying with quarrelsome waves. "You all right?" Turner tried to stop the swaying beneath him. He bent his knees, then decided he would do better back on the ground. The bright white spot that was his whole vision began to darken at the edges. A shotgun blast right up close to you sure is enough to knock you down, isn't it, boy? There's lots of ways to knock a man down, and that's one of them. I took this shotgun away from a friend of yours just a little while ago, a Mr. Jake Eason. He had it pressed up against my chest at the time, and he was ready to pull the trigger. Turner kept blinking, trying to darken the bright white. He could just make out the sheriff to one side, standing tall and dark, the shotgun held up over his shoulder. I wanted you to know what it felt like, boy. Wanted you to know what one of your friends was about to do.